Grafton, Illinois, a small town on the Mississippi with a monumental idea: to create a national memorial to recognize all veterans from all branches of the service. At the heart of this new center will be bronze figures climbing a limestone cliff that runs along the highway coming into town. The site is reminiscent of the cliff the 2nd Army Rangers scaled at Point Du Hoc on D-Day. Those Rangers cleared the way under lethal fire to help troops landing at Normandy, charting a course in history. Many gave their lives for freedom. This memorial is not just about one battle or one war. It's for all soldiers who served in the United States Armed Forces. To remember and honor them and educate future generations, we are building the National Memorial of Military Ascent right here in the heartland. This sacred place of reflection and healing will connect us, acknowledging the wounds and sacrifices of military service, attesting to the dignity of duty. Please join us as a founding sponsor for this monumental project. To learn more, visit our website at graftonmemorial.org. The National Memorial of Military Ascent, a place to remember, to honor, and to educate.
Good morning, fellow Legionnaires. I'm the mayor of Grafton, Illinois, Mike Morrow, and I'm a proud member of the American Legion Post number 648, the 20th District, with our guys sitting out there. And I'm going to talk to you this morning about the Grafton National Memorial of Military Ascent. First thing we're going to start off with is Omaha Beach. And Omaha Beach, that's where we saw the slide we're coming in. The next slide is we're going to talk about Point Du Hoc. Point Du Hoc was a point of land that stuck in between Omaha Beach and Utah Beach, and they had a clear line of sight right down the beach out into the channel. And if this line of sight if these guns up on that point were not taken out, then the landings would have had very serious implications on both Utah Beach and on Omaha Beach. This is an actual photo of Point Du Hoc as it looks today. I've been honored to be there 3 different times. And as you can see, Omaha Beach to the left, Utah Beach to the right. The Rangers were to come in at 06:30 in the morning with their landing craft and climb the cliffs of Point Du Hoc, which were 100 feet high, take out the positions on the top of the cliff, and then continue to move inland. Well, everything, as you know, goes wrong when the first bullet flies. What actually happened was they didn't get in there till about 10 after 7, and they had 225 Rangers that climbed that cliff. 77 of those Rangers were killed in action, and 152 of them were wounded. Now, it was supposed to be met up with the folks on Omaha Beach at noon on top of that cliff, but they didn't make it. What happened was that the connection didn't happen until 2 days later. So they had to hold that position for 2 days. There were only 90 Rangers left that were worthwhile moving on foot. Next slide. This is a painting of what it probably looked like because, as you know, there were not many photographs that were kept on Omaha Beach. The first thing I did when I became mayor is we appointed a commission to look at ways to honor our veterans. The city of Grafton has a population of veterans, 17%, which is the largest per capita in the state of Illinois. First thing our commission did was we appointed a 501c3, which this 501c3 is to look to ways to do this. So what we had to do first is look at what the vision would be to honor our veterans. The commission got together, and when I was with my wife in the center there on Omaha Beach on the 70th and the 75th anniversaries, I was honored to give a speech to the Bedford Association on Omaha Beach on D-Day during the 70th. The lady on the far right back there was our French commissioner. From that visit, we came up with our vision of using Point Du Hoc. We were traveling down the Great River Road, and we actually saw as I turned to looked at the cliffs, I told my wife, I said, "Ooh, Point Du Hoc." Now, this right here this is Jamie Henderson from Henderson Associates Architects in Edwardsville. He and I mind melded on what we were going to do with the vision, and he took that, and from this vision, we saw this first drawing. This was the first pencil sketch that we saw. It shows those rangers climbing the cliff in the background, the cliff in Grafton that you saw in the movie. And it has the 5 obelisks in the front in the shape of a pentagon that will represent the branches of the armed service. Now, I was given this presentation at one point, and a smart young man in the audience said, well, what about the Space Force? Now, I'm quick on my feet. I said, the Space Force is going to be a hologram above the 5 branches of the service. And when I got done with that, I got home, called the architect, and he said, yeah, we can do that. So that was good. Now, the next slide that we're going to look at was the actual watercolor painting. He asked me, do we want to do a computer-generated or watercolor? And I said, I like watercolor. So we did that, and this is actually how it's going to look. We're going to have the 2 lines going up. We're going to have 6 rangers on the cliff face climbing, 1 German on the top throwing a hand grenade, and on the bottom, the remainder getting ready to move up. You see the 5 obelisks in the front representing the 5 branches of the service, and we can't see the hologram because that's up in the sky. Next slide. This is the actual site. The circle in red is our existing visitor center that you saw from the overhead shot. Next is the new museum that we're going to put in. Next is where the military plaza is going to be with the obelisks. And next is where the monument is going to be. And as we said earlier, this isn't just going to be a memorial for just the World War II point, which is that Point Du Hoc piece gets it in the door. We're going to have all the other wars represented and all the other services, as we'll talk about in a minute. Next. This is the NMMA campus, the other drawing that we have, if you see. And when you leave here today on your breaks and so forth, we have booths set up on the outside, just outside the door, where you can get your T-shirts and all that good stuff, support the memorial, and all the data and information on the memorial itself. Next slide. We're also working with Lucy Creative out of Chicago. Lucy Creative are the ones that did the first Infantry Division Museum, and they created a wonderful interior for that, and we're working with them to do that. Next slide. This is what we're going to talk about, shows the artist's conception of the museum connecting to the existing city museum, and we're going to have an immersive experience theater in our museum. And when we were in Omaha Beach, we went to a museum that had an experience theater. It's probably had about maybe 30 nice cushy chairs. You went in and sat down. It was all white walls and a white ceiling. Boom. All of a sudden, we were right in the middle of a landing craft. That landing craft was heading into Omaha Beach. There were big landing craft on either side of us. There was ships in the back, and you could hear the shells flying overhead. It was actually a real experience. We'll have similar things to that, and there'll also be war experiences, but also we're going to do for the Coast Guard, have a helicopter where you can actually sit in on a skid and go through a rescue operation on the Mississippi River during flooding. Next. Let's talk about the monument itself real quickly. Next slide. Carolina Bronze is the sculptors, the foundry that's producing these, and as you saw from the video that you saw some people look like they had a little thing. They were digitally scanning these live models. In order to create a life-size bronze statue, it takes 2 years, and that 2-year process includes the lost wax burning method. Well, what this is going to do is we're going to cut that time in half to 1 year, and we're going to use what you call the digital scanning of a live model in actual period garb. And they take that to a 3D printer in Portland, Oregon, and from there it goes in sections back to the foundry in North Carolina, and they'll start putting it together. Next slide. This is the 2nd Ranger Battalion out of St. Louis, and the 2nd Ranger Battalion is a living history reenacting group, and they replicate Point Du Hoc. Running into these folks was amazing. I was at a dinner one night in St. Louis at a mayor's dinner and Christmas. It was very boring. My wife skipped out, which was good. The lady across the table from me was also, her husband skipped out, and we started talking, and she said, well, my husband is a reenactor. And I said, yeah, what's he do? Reenacts Point Du Hoc. So we chatted, and I learned, and from there we got a hold of Master Sergeant John Petrozinski, retired Air Force, and he is our representative with the group, along with this group that has all of the equipment, all of the vehicles, and we're now tied in with them as our official living history for the monument. Next slide. We've had, on the first week of June this year, we had the live models come in. We didn't get the older guys. People said, Mayor, we want you to go ahead and scan. I said, at my age, I didn't climb that cliff. So we look for the younger people, the 20-year-olds. This young man here actually works for the city. And great guy. He was looking at making the radio man's position. And while he was being scanned, his mother and the other two daughters, little children, were there watching, and she was crying. And the dad, who was a veteran, was out in the hallway just kind of looking in. You could see he was trying to fight back the tears. And I walked out to him and I said, you know your son is making history. And he says, I know. And he started crying. Next slide. We also had an active duty Army Rangers come from the 75th Ranger Battalion. They took their time on their vacation to come down and also pose with us and help us. This sergeant here, active duty Ranger, is replicating that falling position that you see on the monument. We've had a lot of discussion with the architect. How do we do that? Because we can't have everybody climbing the cliff because they all didn't make it. So what's going to happen here is that he scanned one half, then scanned the other half. Dave is in the background on his computer putting these together, and they just did sections and all put it together, and they got that falling position. Next slide. The Foundry also told us that, what we're doing here is something unique. They said that this is the only, and they did their homework, and they came back and said, this is the only monument of its kind in the world. Let that sink in for a minute, because it did with me. And they said, we want in. So they've been ours. And they also said, you need to think about making a documentary, because this would be about a 2.5, 3-year process. So we did. We hired a documentary firm out of Michigan, and they've come down and they've did that film that you saw. They produced that for us. They did that. I put that in last night. He said, oh, by the way, we threw something together real quick for you. Great. Then they're doing a great job. They interviewed all of our board of directors. The gentleman that you see in the red shirt being interviewed is one of our board of directors. He's also a Vietnam veteran. And he came in to do his interview at City Hall there. And as soon as he was finished, he got up. His wife was waiting outside. They took him to the hospital. He was hospitalized for 16 days. He almost lost his leg. I asked him, I went, why did you not just go to the hospital? He said, because this is such an important project, I wanted to make sure that they got it, because I didn't know if I was going to survive. Next slide. We've also made the National Magazine of the American Legion. That was in the June edition as it came out, right before D-Day. So if you haven't seen it, we have it out there on the table. Next. And we always end up by saying that this is a photo I took that you heard in there: honor, remember, and educate. These are the 3 pillars of our memorial, because younger generations, even people our ages, don't realize and don't understand everything that happens and all the good things that you have done and all the things that the Legion has done. So to educate. This is our banker, and what he did was when we went in a year ago to start this, and we had a meeting with his folks, and they said, yep, we're going to let you do the bank, and they started talking about all the fees and everything, and he's the regional president. And he said, we're not charging these guys any fees, period. And on top of that, we're going to give them a $50,000 donation. So that's a banker. Next slide. This is our graftonmemorial.org. This is our site. Do you have any questions for me? I'll be glad to answer them when? When from my seat. So thank you all very much, and God bless America.
I'm not trying to do any off. You can start, Karen.